In this video, we're going to be doing a very brief introduction to the Vue.js framework. This isn't intended to be like a full lesson or a guide. Honestly, you're not even really expected to necessarily take away most of what we're going to do here. It's more just to take a look at it, to get you used to seeing the kind of things that Vue does. And as we move forward through the quarter, you'll actually see more of this stuff and you'll learn more about it specifically. But for now, this is just to see what is Vue, what's it do. Now, to get started on that, we're gonna actually have to create a project, right? Create a project folder and Git and all that stuff. And because this is something that maybe a lot of you haven't actually done yet, I thought, hey, here's a good opportunity for us to do that as well. So the first thing we need to do is create a folder. Now, I'm already in my projects folder or my code folder. So I just need to make a new one. In this case, what I want to call it, I think it's an introduction to Vue. So we'll call it Vue intro. Change directory into there, and now we're going to see it's just an empty folder. Now we could just get started now, but because we want to eventually put this on GitHub, and also we want Git to, like, we always want to use Git to track our projects, I'm going to go ahead and actually initialize a Git repository. Now, if you've never done that before, it's actually pretty straightforward. You just type git and then init, and it's ready. So now we'll see if we type git status. It says there's no commits yet, but there is actually a Git history. So now I'm going to open this up in my favorite text editor, which for me is VS Code. So we have it here. We have the Vue intro folder that we were just in, and it's empty. So first we have to make a file. Now, because this is an HTML project or a web app, I'll start with index.html. So now a blank file. Now, of course, you're familiar enough with HTML. You could put the basic skeleton out here, HTML, head, body. But I'm actually just going to use the Emmet since we're using VS Code, and we're done. So maybe for a title, Vue introduction or Vue.js introduction. Sure. Now, because we're going to be working with Vue, and we're doing it here in a very limited fashion, but we're going to be working with Vue, the first thing I need to do is actually get the Vue code. Now, we'll see in later assignments ways that we do that for actual projects that we want to deploy. But for this, because this is just experimentation, it's just for learning, I'm actually going to rely on what's called the content delivery network. So if we actually go to the Vue.js website, you'll see this is actually in their introduction to what is Vue. They actually provide a link to the development version. So all we have to do is just stick this into our HTML. Like, I'll put it up here in the head. Because right now, all that code from this file, right, the file that's here on the internet, there's nothing there other than code for Vue. So loading it early is not a big deal. In fact, we probably want to load it as early as possible, so then the code that we do write will actually be able to access it. Great, so we got that. Now, in order to understand Vue, it's important that what Vue does, and why it's called a progressive framework, is that you can really do it in as small a scale as you want, up to building entire projects around it. So we're doing it on a very small scale here. What we're going to say is we're going to create an element, a div, I'll call it app. So this is a div. Now, we could load this page in our browser and we wouldn't see anything. Of course, we could put content here, hello world, and we'd see hello world. With Vue, you actually create an object in JavaScript, a Vue object, and you associate it with an element. So, for example, this element. And basically, Vue is then going to start dynamically rendering that HTML element in the DOM. What do I mean by that? Well, let's find out. So, first of all, I need some script. So I'm just going to do the script right here in the HTML file. Come on, there we go. You can also, of course, do this in a separate file if you want, and of course, normally we would, but because this is super quick, I'm just going to put it right there. So let's go ahead and create a Vue object. So we're going to say let my Vue equals new Vue. So we're saying we're going to create this new Vue. So okay, well, what are the parts of a Vue object? Well, the first thing we need to tell Vue what element we're connecting it to. So in this case, we said we wanted this div to be connected to Vue. So we're going to say, okay, the element, the L, is going to be equal to #app, right? Because that's saying the element with the ID app. Great, so we got that there. Now, what other things do the Vue objects have? Well, there's a whole lot of things, and we'll learn more about that in the future. But for now, the other big thing is data, right? Every Vue object has data. So data are just a series of variables that are things that are being stored in that object. So let's say a message, right? Hello world. That's what I typed earlier. So now we have this message, and we want that to be in our Vue element. So how do we get it there? Well, in this case, we're starting really easy. We use what's called the mustache case, I believe, or mustache tags. Right? Those are two curly braces. I guess they kind of look like a mustache. And we just type in the name of the variable that we want Vue to display there. So normally, if I turned all this stuff off, in fact, let's do it real quick just to show you what's going on here. So, whoops. Got to put your JavaScript comments in the right place. So I'm going to comment that out, right? I'm going to save this, and I'm going to open this up in my live server, in my browser. Now you'll see that, hey, there it just has the mustache message. That's not very useful. But let's go back to our VS Code and remove these comments and now include the script where we define the Vue object and connect it to this div. Right? So let's see what happens. So we do that, and we go back, and now it says hello world. So what it says is Vue saw that and said, oh, this is me. I have to dynamically change the content of this. Now, well, I keep saying dynamically, but nothing about that was very dynamic. But let's take a minute to think about that. I'm going to go into the JavaScript console. I'm going to say, so what do we call the Vue object there? You'll see we called it my Vue. So I'm going to say my Vue.message equals goodbye world. Okay. Now you see this up here, that message has changed to goodbye world. So that happened with the page still running. We didn't need to do anything crazy. We just changed the content of that data. So that's where Vue starts to become really powerful. It reacts and changes to data very quickly and easily. So instead of doing, if you remember in last quarter, we did a lot of getting elements by ID and manually changing things. It just does it. So that's neat. But let's see what else Vue can do while we're here, right? So the other important thing about Vue, let's go back to our VS Code. The other important thing is that it does more than just let us put variables like that. It also has what are called directives, things that it tells Vue to do things in a certain way, to process data in a certain way, and to process HTML. So one of them is what's called the v-for directive. What the v-for directive is, it's basically, it tells Vue to loop through an array and display, for every item in the array, do something. Display this element in a certain way. That sounds a little weird, so let's slow down and take a look here. Let's create a new div. So we'll say a new div, and I'll call it list app, right? Doesn't matter what I call it as long as I tell my Vue object what it is. Now let's say I want to make a shopping list. Shopping list. I don't know why there's an exclamation point, but that's exciting. So I'm going to put my unordered list. Now I'm going to stop here. Why? Because I know that I'm going to be doing something with Vue here. So I'm going to stop for a bit, and I'm actually going to go over to my script and create my new Vue object called list Vue. Is a new Vue, and we're going to connect it to that div I just made, list app. And now I'm going to give it some data. In this case, I'm going to give it a little bit different. I'm going to give it a shopping list. So we'll call it list. I'll even say shopping list. Oh, wait, no, that doesn't. Let's say shopping list. There we go. Don't put dashes in there. All right, and let's see things I want to shop for. I don't know, flour, eggs, salt, baking powder. I guess I'm going to make some bread. Potatoes, onions. Sure, there's my shopping list, right? So now, if I wanted to, I could try to do what I did before, where I could do shopping list, right? But that's probably going to look funky. Let's just take a look, though. Let's see what happens. Oh, right. It literally just output that thing as an array. That's ugly. I don't like that. But here's the thing. This is where we talk about the v-for directive. So I'm going to make a list item, because this is a list. So I'll do list item, and this is where it gets interesting. I do v-for, right? We're saying this. It's the directive v-for. Say for every item in shopping list. So this may look a little bit like a loop that you recognize, just a little bit. We're saying, hey, we're going to, for everything in the shopping list, which is an array, for each one item, we're going to do something. We're going to create content. In this case, I'm just going to be easy. I'm just going to say, hey, just put the content there. So why is this powerful? We're saying no matter what that shopping list is, you're going to make a list item for each thing in the list and display it. So let's take a look at what that looks like. Now you see, oh, we have our list, right? And again, this is still, it's a dynamic list. So if we said list view dot shopping list dot pop, which pop is how you remove the last item of an array, whoop, you see our onions are gone. Or for example, list view dot shopping list dot push tomatoes. Now we have tomatoes. There's no E there. Where is there? I forget. Anyway, we have tomatoes on the list. So it's again dynamically doing this. Now you can imagine having a more complicated website where you actually have things, buttons, or things that are changing this, right? So that's pretty powerful. But let's just take a few more examples of things that Vue does that I think are good to be aware of as we're moving forward. Because it's not just this v4. There are other directives, right? There are other ways that we want to parse data. And the big one is if and on. So, okay, let's slow down there, Andrew. Okay, so the big thing is we've got one is if it's a conditional. It's saying, hey, if something is true, which we've worked with conditionals. So let's make a new div with a new ID. We'll call it if app. Sure, that sounds great. I'm going to actually start here with the directive already. So I'm going to call it seeable. Yeah, sure. I don't want to use visible because that's like an important word, right? So this thing, if seeable is true, right, is basically what it's saying. Okay, and then you can see this text. So if we go right now, well, it's just you can see this text. There's nothing there because we haven't created a view object yet. So we'll say let if view equal. So now I'm going to create this view object, and again, first thing I have to always do is associate it with an element in our DOM, in our HTML. So I've got that there. Now I'm going to give it data, and as you may have already suspected, I can have a variable called seeable. So I'm going to set it to true. Now, if you're thinking ahead, this is saying if seeable is true, right? Then, well, if seeable is true, seeable is true, then it's just going to be visible. And it is. Well, let's go ahead and see what happens if I set it to false. Suddenly you can't see the text. Not a surprise. And more importantly, if view.seeable equals true, we can now see the text. Now I want to take this one step further, and I want to actually show you how we can actually make interactive components that kind of respond to user input. So the big thing now is we've learned about, okay, L was how we define what the element that is associated with this view object. Data is how we define data that we wanted this object to have. Now we have a new thing, methods. Methods are like functions, right? Or methods, object methods, things that we want this view object to be able to do. So let's say, I don't know, I'll make a new function or method called toggle message. And it's going to be a function. I'm going to say, hey, what do I want? Well, I want it to change the value of seeable. So I'll say this.seeable equals not this.seeable. So it just says whatever it is, make it the opposite. Great. But that, of course, that on itself, we don't have a way to run this. Unless, as an example, I'll always go to the console. We can say if view.toggle message. And so that works. That's doing it. Great. So now how do we make that part of our page? Well, we're getting there. This is where we have a new directive called vOnClick. Right? So this is saying, it's vOn is saying on something, right? On click is in this case an event, right? We're going to say on click, we're going to say, oops. So when the person clicks this button, we're going to say toggle message. And then, I don't know, that's just the text that appears on the button. So now you see we have this button here, toggle message. And now you see the text appears, it disappears, appears, disappears. So it's actually, it gave us a way to look at to take user interactions and modify things based on that. So right now we've seen that Vue can do a lot of things, all by just associating an element in our page with a Vue object. So this, when I said earlier that this is a progressive framework, you could use Vue in as small a way as this if you wanted to. Now, what we're going to find out later, and in fact, in the other assignment for this module, is that actually we're going to see a much bigger way to use Vue. So don't worry, we'll see how it works. This is just something to be aware of basically what Vue does. It connects an element in HTML, usually a div, to an object in JavaScript, in the script, right? And then now these two are connected. List app, the list view and the list app are now connected to one another. So it's good stuff. So now that we're done, another thing that maybe you haven't done is, well, first of all, like always, we have to commit our changes. So we'll do git add everything. Okay, we'll say first commit. Now we want to push it up to GitHub. Now it's important to understand that we just created this Git repository, so it's not on your or my GitHub yet. But there's actually a tutorial on GitHub's website. So we have here is adding an existing project to GitHub using the command line. Great. So you'll choose Mac or Windows or Linux if you happen to be running Linux. Super straightforward. First thing we do is we go to GitHub and we create a new repository. So here we say I'm in my GitHub. I go to new. Okay, so I don't use a template. Repository name, I'm going to go ahead and call it Vue Intro. An introduction to Vue.js. Right. And now I don't want to set anything. So it actually, if you read the README here, it says, do not initialize a new repository with a README license or git ignore files. The reason why is because if you do that, you'll have a mismatch between your repository and on your computer and the one on GitHub. Okay, so now it says open the terminal, change the current working directory to your local project, which we're already in, initialize the git, which we've already done, add the files, commit the files, already done that. So here's the big one. At the top of your GitHub repository's quick setup page. So that's, oh, we have to create the repository. Oops. So it's creating it. Now we have this quick setup page. It actually gives us the link here. So I'm going to copy that. And it tells us to do, this is the commands we want to do. We do git remote add origin, and then the name of that repository URL. So let's do that. So git remote add origin, and then git remote v. It tells us, hey, that's been set up. Great. So the next command there, it says git push -u origin master. So that's important to do because it's going to tell us where we want to push the changes, but also it sets this as to the default. So we do git push -u origin master. So it pushed all that. It says branch master set up to track remote branch master from origin. Great. So we're good there. Now we go back here and I'll reload my repository. And you'll see I have my file there. Index.html. It's got all the changes I made. And now I will go to settings and just set it up as GitHub pages, right? Like we always do, set it to the master branch. And then in some amount of time, we'll be able to actually go to this page listed here. Of course, it probably won't work for me. Yeah, it's currently not found, but usually takes a while for that to load up. And once it's available, you'll be able to actually see that page. Granted, it's not a whole lot, but it's still something, you want to make sure you set up the GitHub pages. Always get used to that when you're working on these kind of things. So there you go. That is the introduction to a very brief kind of, this is what Vue.js is going to let you start doing. Now, in the next coming weeks, we're going to be working more with it. We're going to be doing things where we're taking large amounts of data and using those directives to parse them in interesting ways. So just hold on. I just wanted to give everyone that little introduction before we actually started working in Vue.